What a weird way to hold the bottom. This is better. Hello, everyone, and welcome to BHT Studios. This is the Fujifilm X-H1 with the Minolta 58mm f1.4. I know there is a f1.2 version of this lens, but I can't afford it, and it is just as unsharp wide open as this lens. And so there's no point in spending all that money for a lens that isn't very sharp. But this is a lot of fun. It's not bad in the center, and it's reasonably sharp when you stop it down, but it's just kind of a fun lens. And so, anyways, that was the beginning camera that I use. I know I use a placeholder in the thumbnail, and people often wonder, like, that's not the picture that's in the thumbnail. I need to put something, right? So after the show, I'm gonna go and create another little thumbnail. And like I said, I would do in all my not all, some of my videos, I'm gonna do a sneakers feature of the week. And so today it is this sneaker right here. It is the Asics and collaboration with reigning champion. It is a outdoor brand here in Vancouver, a athletic wear brand, and this is called the Gel Quantum 365 Trail version, and it uses a ripstop nylon. You can see that little cross stitching there, and it has a full length gel cushioning, has a midsole mud guard, an adjustable shock, this pull cord here, and this is actually a Vancouver themed sneaker. They actually made 3 of them, and I think it was for the Olympics because, as you guys might know, Asics is a Japanese company. It used to be called Onitsuka Tiger. It still is Onitsuka Tiger, but when they sold to North America, they ended up changing their name to an acronym, Anima Sana in Corpore Sana, which is sound mind, sound body in Latin. And inside each of these shoes, they actually have the coordinates of the city that they are that these shoes are based on. So this is based in Vancouver, but they do have a Kyoto edition and a Tokyo edition. I have the Kyoto and I haven't got the Tokyo yet. So, anyways, that's it. I thought I would talk about this sneaker, and I'm gonna keep on doing this until I get a sneaker sponsor, because eventually I'm gonna run out of sneakers to showcase, right? And so let me know down in the comments, guys, how the audio is. I am using a different computer, which I might talk about later. And I was going to use this camera here for my main camera, but I was having some issues and I didn't know if it was the computer or if it was the camera that had the issue in terms of compatibility. So instead of messing things up, I'm using the XT4 with the 23mm f2. But this time I have it at f2 and I have it at 60 frames per second. So I'm not sure if this looks more fluid or not. I think the video capture card is what really limits how smooth this video is going to be anyways, and also YouTube's compression algorithms for YouTube. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, until I get a sneaker sponsor, I'm gonna keep on doing this until I run out of shoes, and then I start from the beginning. And eventually, maybe someone like Adidas or Asics or Nike won't. I don't dance well enough. I'm not a good enough athlete. I don't know. We'll see. New Balance. I'd love to be sponsored by New Balance and then show off their sneakers every week. But thank you for joining me here on my weekly live. I was really late in letting you guys know when the live show was going to be, and so I apologize for such short notice. I tried to make it. I think initially I said Thursday night, but then I moved it around. I think last week I did it Friday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and now it's Friday evening at 6 p.m. So I'm going to just move it around a little bit. So please be patient with me, and also let me know in the comments, not in the comments here, but in the comments in, like, once I post it, what sort of time you guys prefer. I can't appease everyone because I do have, like, right now this is really bad for Europe. When I did 11 a.m. last week, a lot of people were joining in from Germany and the UK, and they had said the timing was perfect because 11 a.m. here in Vancouver was like early evening in Europe, and now it's early morning in Europe, but it's a good time for Asia. And I'll probably start seeing a lot of, oh, great, Donald. Yeah, I'm using the Rode Video Micro. Before I was going through my XT4, but now I'm directly connecting it to my new laptop here because it has an analog in. And I'm just a little bit worried about lag. I can sort of see it already. Like, there's a millisecond or two of lag of the video with the audio, and that was the thing I was worried about. But I was getting that anyways, going through the X-T4. And so until I get OBS up and running, which I know I keep on promising I will learn, but I'm constantly getting new gear that I have to keep on incorporating into my review that I just haven't had time to learn it. So hopefully I will get to it. Derek from Toronto, hello. I miss Toronto. This time of year is a little cold. I wouldn't want to be there. Although it's funny, every time I go to Toronto, it always seems to be in the winter, fall, winter. I've been in Toronto, I think 4 times in my life, 5 times. Each time is between November and January, and it's always been freezing cold. And so I need to, actually, that's not true. I was there once in September for a Fujifilm camera launch, but and actually the weather was really nice in September. But after that, it's been way too cold. And also, I'm thinking, should I wear a hat, or this is kind of part of my uniform, right? There we go. I'll put on a hat. I feel more comfortable in a hat. And let's just see if I can catch up. Thank you for letting me know about the audio, guys. I think I am talking a little too loud though. Maybe I should drop the volume a little bit. I get excited because I don't get feedback, audio feedback loop. And so all I hear is my own voice. And so that's another thing about getting OBS and getting something like Discord or something working. It'd be nice to have a split screen with a co-host, or just kind of going back and forth between me and a co-host, or a sound person's producer slash switcher that can switch to different screens, like Lou Later and Linus Tech Tips. They have their kind of live show, but there's always a sidekick. Taka needs a sidekick. Who wants to be my sidekick? And so until then, I'm gonna have to try to run all of this myself. So let's try to catch up here. And also, in the thing, I kind of said film versus digital. I just kind of did that a little bit like clickbait. You guys know we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. I do have cameras here. Like Fujifilm just sent me a long-term loan on the X100V. I didn't have it for very long. I had it for, well, I shouldn't say that. I had it for about a month at the beginning of the year, but I also had the X-T4 at the same time. And so I spent 80% of my time with the X-T4 and like a week with the X100V, but I also have my long-term loan on the GR3. So I have both of these right now, and I am working on a review on these kind of EDC type review. And then I think last week I really focused a lot on my X Pro 3. Look how fingerprinty that thing gets so quickly. And then I have my Minolta XD, which is always in my studio here. I love this setup with the 45 f2. It's a pancake, but just a very beautiful lens. And then these are all the same cameras, right? Because this is what's in my studio. Olympus XA with the A11 flash and a Konica Big Mini right here. And again, I'm seeing everything in reverse, but you guys are seeing everything normal, right? I think maybe YouTube does that on purpose. I just read that backwards. Konica Big Mini is backwards, but you guys see it correctly. I think I asked you guys last week. And then again, here's the XH1 with the 58 millimeter f1.4 from Minolta. All right, so let's so that's the kind of the gear part. Let's just see the comments. I'm starting to see questions here. Jay Graffer, you didn't miss very much at all. We're just getting going. So thanks for joining. Hey, John Ishii. How's it going? John Ishii is a good friend of mine. He is in Kuala Lumpur, I think, still, John. And he is a retired photojournalist. And so I put John Ishii at the, like John Lehman, John Ishii. They're both photojournalists that I highly respect. I love the work that they have done. And right now, because John is retired, he still takes photos, but now for himself. And his wife, Diana. Hello, Diana. She's also an amazing photographer. I think she just kind of started shooting seriously maybe within the last 3 years, but her photos are beautiful. So thanks for joining, John. If you guys have any questions for John, just ask him down below. You can just ignore me if you wish. But John's work for everyone. He's a North American, Japanese American, right, John? But I think he had kind of a I can't remember. Your dad's an ambassador or something, and you traveled the world or something like that. He was worked for the State Department in the U.S. You can ask John, but he's traveled the world growing up and also traveled the world as a photojournalist. So John has an interesting story. One day, once I get the Discord and OBS and whatever apps that I need to bring people in, there's even a way of having Zoom and then streaming it through OBS through YouTube, and that would be even great. Being able to do Zoom kind of live Q&A, but also be broadcasting it live on YouTube. I think that'd be fun. But ask John any questions down below. But I'll have John on, both Johns. I already talked to John Lehman. I haven't talked to John Ishii, but I'm sure John would love to come on these live shows once I have everything set up to do live. Wish they would make a 23 pancake so I can put it on my X-Pro3 and not want to buy the X100V. Yeah, you know, I don't think it'll be possible because I think we talked about this before. You could see how far back the lens is on the, like that little circle with the line basically tells you how far back the sensor is. It's not focusing, is it? How far back the sensor is to the body. So half the lens. This technically is not a pancake. This is a full-size lens. It's just the lens goes all the way back here, where the X-Pro3, look where the X-Pro3's line is. See where that line is? It's way over here instead of way over here. And so to make a 23 lens really flush in here, either it'd be a 23 f4 or 23 f3.5, or half the lens will be inside here. But the flange back distance on this isn't that great. And so if you ever seen like rangefinder medium format cameras like the Mamiya 7, like more than half the lens is inside. It goes way inside, and that's what's happening with the X100F or the X100 series. Is half the lens is on the inside. So technically, it is not a pancake, because people think, well, if you can put a pancake on a X100, why can't they put on? It's not a pancake. Half the lens is inside. So if you're willing to live with the 23 f4, or you just get the 27 pancake, right? But if you're willing to live with the 23 f4, then they could make it. I don't know how much of a demand there is for a 23 f4 pancake, but it'd be great. I think it'd be cool if they can make it. Or and me and Billy have talked about this, and Billy even said, Take, I've talked to Fujifilm, and those of you who don't know who Billy is, he is the technical manager for Fujifilm Canada, Billy Luong. And I said, Billy, why don't you just make some manual focus lenses? You make him super pancake. And he says he talked to the management in Japan, and they said they're not interested in making manual focus lenses. So if you get a lens that's from like TT Artisans, 7 Artisans, and by the way, they've actually reached out to me. So those of you that asked, Take, why don't you review TT Artisan, 7 Artisan? Through Fuji Love, they went through them and then asked me, Take, would you want to review our glass? And I said, sure. So starting next month in January, they're going to be sending me lenses. And I think the first lens I asked for was their Noct. Is it a 35.95 or something? So they're sending that to me. They said that Dan Bailey has it up in Alaska, and they have to wait to get it back from him. And so they'll be sending that to me. But getting a lens like a per gear 25 millimeter f1.6, that's also a really nice flat flush against the camera body. And I love using that lens on my Fujifilm as well, as long as you don't mind using a manual focus lens. Let me just try to now, lots of questions coming in here. So here we go. Question about the 18 f2. What do you think about this lens versus the 23 f2? They're both quirky lenses. I don't like the 18 f2's build quality. It feels really cheap. Optically, it's okay. If you stop it down, it's fine. By the time it's f4, it's like super sharp. But the whole point is to shoot at f2. I'm waiting for an 18 f1.4 or a 14 f1.4. But I prefer the look of the 23 f2, although the 18, which is the 28 mil equivalent, is actually my focal length. But Fujifilm has made me not love it on Fujifilm. Let me just see here. First time here, Darko from Winnipeg. Welcome from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Appreciate you joining. Get Camera Girl. Oh, Camera Girl's, this is my studio. She's nowhere near here. And she worked all day, 9 to 6. And now she's relaxing and she's probably watching right now. Let me just see here. She's probably eating ice cream and watching me, but I do have my messaging app here and she'll tell me if something's wrong. So she's kind of here in spirit. Let me see here. I'm gonna skip over the comments if that's all right, guys, and try to catch up to the questions. Um, have you put the wrong ISO setting on your film camera? All the time. Not all the time. Often. Often. It happens, especially when the camera doesn't, I mean, obviously, when the camera doesn't have auto DX encoding, there are some most of my film cameras were auto, like it had the DX encoding. So once you pop it in, it already knows what ISO it is. But it's when I have my fun hobby cameras that I'm out shooting for fun. But in general, when I'm doing that style of photography, I'm paying very close attention to what film I'm putting, so I don't make a mistake that way. My Leica M7 has the DX encoder reader in there, so it's always correct. And once I put it in, I turn it on, the ISO flashes inside and tells me what's in the camera, so I don't forget. And so it's rare now, but it's happened, especially when I'm playing around with push and pull, and then you sort of forget, but it happens. But you're better off to overexpose film anyways. If that's your mistake, it's easily recoverable. If you finish the roll and you realize you were over or under and you're worried about the exposure, then you can get the lab to push or pull for you anyway. So it's not a big deal, but you have to catch it. You have to catch that mistake. Just catch up here. Are you in the USA? Amazing planet. I am very close to the USA. I am in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and not Vancouver, Washington State, USA. But we are a border town. Most major Canadian cities, with the exception of Calgary, and Edmonton is not really a border town, but Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, like we're all sort of right near the US border because, that's where all the business and all the trade is. So we are about 45 minutes out of Blaine, Washington. So we're quite close, but no, in Canada. John Ishii asking about the 35.95. That's the TT Artisan. That's the or the 7 Artisan. It's the third-party lens manufacturer I think it's out of Shenzhen. Almost all the major sort of camera gear, third-party stuff is coming out of Shenzhen. I think Aperture, Godex, Free World, I think they're called. A lot of them are coming out of there because that's kind of like the industrial, like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hong Kong. They're all kind of, they call it what do they call it? The new Silicon Valley of China or something like that. But anyways, it's a third-party lens, manual focus, which is fine with me. EC, have you shot with Mint's new camera for Instax Square? No, but I've known about it for two and a half years because as soon as Gary came out with the RF70, the first thing I said to him was, how about the Square? And I even, as soon as the Square came out, I immediately mailed him an empty cartridge of the Square so that he can get the actual size. And I've been sort of, I wouldn't say I've been consulting him, but every time I go to Hong Kong, he showed me where he was at in the project. And then I would say, oh, it'd be cool if you could do this. It'd be cool if you could do that. And we've been talking about this release for a very long time. And so I'm really excited. He didn't have time to send me a copy, but I'm sure when he has time, he will send me a working copy and I will be able to review it for you guys. But I do have the RF70. It's not here, but I'm really looking forward to testing. It's definitely about 20-30% smaller than the RF70, which is great. Kevin Day asking about being co-host. We could talk about it. Best kit lens for the SX10. Depends if you want to go wide or if you want to go in the middle. And depending if you want to save on size and weight or if you want the most versatile lens. Because the most versatile lens I would say is the XF16 to 80 f4 constant or the 10 to 24 f4 constant. Both of them are weather sealed. Both of them has IBIS, I mean IBIS OIS, which will work in conjunction with IBIS in the XS10. However, in terms of lightweightness, I would recommend the XF 18 to 55 f2.8 to f4, which is definitely smaller than the 16 to 80. Or you get a nice prime in the middle, like a 23 f2 or 35 f2. But personally for me, and they do kit it with those two lenses, the 18 to 55 2.8 to f4 or the 16 to 80 f4 constant. I like the 16 to 80. It just works out better for me. How do I feel? Oh, sorry, here, another one. Kever, do you think the Sony A7C with rangefinder lenses is a good, cheaper alternative to a digital Leica M? Not really, because the one thing the A7C is missing is a really good EVF, and it's harder to, on a digital camera to manually focus. It's probably better for stability and for focusing to use the EVF. And the EVF is really small in the A7C. So if you were going to do that, I would recommend actually get the A7 III. Get the A7 III because it has that larger EVF. The innards are the same as the A7C. So get that instead if you want to, as you said, have a cheaper version of buying a Leica rangefinder. How do I feel about DSLR scanning? Peter, it's great. That's kind of, if I get labs to do the quick lab scan, but I always get better results when I scan off of a light table. And then you have just 1 second here. I have it here. Where is it? Right here, the pixelator. So this is from Hamish from 35mmC, and he sent me the little unit here to put the negs in here. You can do 35, you can do 120, right up to 4x5. And so pixelator, I will put this in the description if I remember. And it's not that expensive either. I think it's like $35 or $40 US or something like that, or 35, 40 pounds for this. And works great. I haven't shot a video on it, but it holds your neg flat. And then you just need like a magic arm or some kind of a contraption, like if you have a proper copy stand. And that's the best way, but it takes more time. That's the thing. If it's like a self-feeding scanner, or if you can afford the size and space and money of an old drum scanner or like an old Coolpix, that's fine. But if you want the highest resolution where you can actually, you're taking photos of the actual film grain, it's the DSLR way. It's the most cost efficient because you already have it, right? And then having a good, if you have a good macro lens, I have multiple macro lenses. A 50 f2.8 is good, especially if you have a cropped digital body, or 100 f2.8, depending on the size of neg that you are scanning. So I highly recommend it. It's a good way of doing it without having to spend too much money. And someone's asking me about Darko. One more question. Do you like the 16 f2.8 lens? I'm trying to get it. But the COVID and the lack of street shooting in Winnipeg, I have not used it much. What is your feeling on the lens? I think I've shot a YouTube video on the 16 f2.8, so you can check that out. I also wrote an article on Fujifilm on the 16 f2.8. I like it for size and weight. Optically, obviously, the 16-1.4 destroys it in terms of like absolute sharpness wide open. The 16-2.8 acts a lot like the XF23. It has weird sort of sharpness issues up close, but when you stop it down, it's fine. And it's really light and compact. So on a body like an XE3 or an XT30 or an SX10, it's really lightweight. And if you're really good at that focal length, which is a 24mm equivalent, it's a fantastic walk around lens that's just fast focus, it's compact, it's light, it's reasonably priced. So I like it for what it is, right? It's not going to compete with the 16-1.4 for shallow depth of field or ultimate sharpness, but it has a cool characteristic to it. And it's still brighter than, like my 16 to 80 f4, you're one stop brighter. Although if you have a 16 to 55 f2.8, it's the same, but it is better, I think, than the wide end of the 16 to 55 f2.8. And in terms of size and weight, you're saving a lot on the weight because the weight of that lens is heavy, the 16 to 55 2.8. So if you're trying to keep things light, then that's a good option lens. Oh, John Ishii talking about going to Point Roberts, Washington. Yeah, but you know the funny thing, John, is I'm not allowed to go to Point Roberts. We're not allowed to cross the border unless you have a reason. So, um, if you came to Vancouver, you have your American citizenship, right? You can just go there, and it's a really weird. Actually, maybe John Lehman can do a story like that because he has a press pass. He can get in there, but yeah, it's a weird part. So those of you guys don't know, there's a little weird little what do you call it when a piece of land mass sticks out, peninsula, whatever it's called, but it's part of the US, but it's not connected to continental US. You have to go through Canada to get there. And so it's this weird little thing where if you have a boat or a ferry, you can go to Washington from Point Roberts, but if you don't, you have to drive through Canada to get to the United States, even though it's technically part of the US. That'd be a fun project, but I'm just not allowed to cross there. Um, Catching up here, guys. Isaac Chen asking, "What's your favorite 35 millimeter SLR system in terms of lens quality? Um, Manual focus or autofocus? When it comes to autofocus, for me, 100% is Minolta autofocus, the alpha mount. So it started in 1985. I truly believe that uh, their lenses, especially their early lenses that came out pre 1990, they really were focused on image quality and not just sharpness, but the quality of autofocus area, the bokeh. And I think I talked about that last week, where they had circular aperture diaphragms in their 1987, 88, 89 lenses, and Nikon and Canon, they didn't care about the bokeh. They just had the 5 and the 7 blade squared off aperture because they were focused on sports, wildlife, super telephoto, like high performance lenses, but not so much. It wasn't catered to the art photographers, the artist photographers, where Minolta were really thinking about artists, those that were doing portraiture, those that were doing nature, and that really wanted to soften out the out of focus areas. A lot of the Minolta autofocus lenses, they came out with a couple of lenses that actually specialize in soft focusing. And what the technology that Fujifilm used on the 5612 APD, the apodized lens iris that's inside the camera, well, that came from Minolta. And in fact, I'm not sure if it's the same person, but one of the Minolta engineers works for Fujifilm now, the lens engineers. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that fellow from Minolta is the guy that said, "Hey, I would love to do an APD version of one of your portrait lenses." Minolta was doing it back in the 80s and 90s, and even back in the old MD mount. Now, if I was going to go MD mount, and I was thinking about lenses, or not MD mount, manual focus lenses, and just thinking about lens, the not the quality lenses, but in terms of characteristic, I actually would go Pentax. I would get a Pentax LX, and Pentax had beautiful manual, and they still do. I think the 77 millimeter f1.8, I think it is. They still sell it as a manual focus lens, but they had beautiful glass that was just focused. Again, like Minolta, they were focusing on overall rendering, not necessarily performance in terms of like autofocus speed and that kind of stuff. It was more about like how does the bokeh look? How does the and Pentax's strength was the SMC, super multi-coat, right? They were the first Japanese manufacturer to super multi-coat their lenses, so not just a one coat but multiple coats. And they put that same technology into their Pentax 6.7 lenses, into the Pentax 645 medium format lenses, and that same technology found their way into the 35 millimeter lenses. So if I was going to go manual focus lens body SLR in terms of image quality, I would go Pentax first, and then I would go Leica R mount second. Now we're just talking about lens quality in terms of characteristic, right? Because if I'm talking about a workhorse, meaning photojournalist, a body and a lens that you're going to bang around, you can drop and kick, and it'll just keep on working. John Ishii will probably tell you it would have been either like this is back in the film days and the manual focus days, so pre 1985, would be probably like the Canon F1 or the Nikon F3. And even at that time, a lot of F3 guys, like a lot of them swore by the F2. right? And the F1 had a really long life, the original F1, the new F1. So those would be the body slash lenses that I would go when it came to workhorse. But like fine art, lens, quirky, weird kind of stuff, I definitely go Pentax, K mount, or Leica R mount. And then for autofocus, I'd say Minolta. Good question though. Thank you. John Ishii, Pixelator. Yeah, go get the Pixelator. It's really cool, especially if you have nags. It just holds it nice and flush. It's really cheap. Like there are more expensive neg holders, like really, really expensive ones, like 100, 200 bucks. But for what you pay for this, it's perfect. All you need is basically a light table. But some people have been just using iPads that are color temperature corrected for 56 to 5500 Kelvin. So it's daylight balance. And then you just drop it on there and then have some way of making sure that your negs are parallel to your camera, so you kind of hold it up. But even then, you can sort of fix it in post, right? If it's off axis a little bit in Photoshop, you can easily fix that. But I think better to capture it in a flat film plane, and then just have it set up in the corner of your studio somewhere, and just I actually have it set up in the corner here, but because of these YouTube videos and stuff, I was always moving it. So I am setting up another desk out in Studio C and use that for copy work. So that's also in the works. Uh, Curvier Takadu, think with the film revival in the last few years that it's missed opportunity that none of major camera companies have made new affordable film cameras. No, Curvier, I think I've talked about this before. Um, the major manufacturers will lose money by making film cameras right now. They would have to sell high-end, super high-end stuff, and that's why Leica. I mean, Leica's always been expensive, but that's the smart thing of them to do, and also low production, and they haven't stopped making them, so the machining has been the same for a lot of the parts for the past 50 or 60 years, where Nikon, Canon, Minolta, Pentax, Ricoh, they all dismantled their film camera manufacturing, and for them to start making film cameras again, they would have to rebuild an entire factory just to make film cameras. And back in the film camera days, remember, like Minolta and Pentax and Canon and Nikon, they may have had each 50 to 70 cameras that they were making. Everything from cheap focus-free point and shoots to their high-end SLRs to when it came to Pentax and Fujifilm, it would mean medium format, and Fujifilm also made large format stuff. So they had an assembly line, some things they can use in all their cameras, and some things were just slightly adjusted. The entire supply chain, entire ecosystem has to be rebuilt to make one camera. So they would have to invest, I wouldn't even know, in today's money, close to like $500 million, or maybe I'm way off, maybe $200 million to set up the infrastructure to make a film camera in the hopes that it'll sell well to a very small niche market. It's not in the books. The only way it would work is if a company like Nikon brings back the F6, because they have all the machining and the tooling and the factory line, everything is already sitting there waiting, and then like it's just a matter of turning on the lights and we can start making them. If they can do that, like I say they, it doesn't matter who they are. If they can do that, that's great. I just don't see any of them sitting on that factory right now. It's all shut down. The lights are turned off. And so you'd have to come from a smaller, more niche like Mint, or like a boutique brand that can make them in smaller batches. The quality won't be the same as when they were pumping out millions of cameras, and then be able to bring it to market a little bit higher than what it used to be. Because remember, a lot of the cameras were lost leaders. They would make them, and even if they lost money, they didn't care, because overall they sold enough volume that some of the lost leaders, which tended to be the more professional bodies, they would subsidize by the lower end cameras that would pay for the higher end cameras. Where today, if any major camera manufacturers makes a film camera, it's going to have to make profit like right away. And not even that, it would take them a year or two to have the entire supply chain and the factory and the ecosystem, as well as the distribution channel, all set up. So they're already in hundreds of millions of dollars before they even sell one. And if you see camera sales right now, they're just taking a dive. None of those major camera manufacturers are going to take that much of a risk to do that. It's going to have to come from, like I said, smaller boutique brands like TT Artisans, Seven Artisans, anyone that's making these quirky, smaller stuff, or a brand like DJI that are right now raking in the money and saying, hey, we want to get into film point and shoots. Let's just do it. Here's 20 people. Here's $10 million. Go out there and play around. Because, film cameras are being made still somewhere in India and China and Vietnam and Russia and even in Japan, but they're probably fixed focus, exposure, cheapo, disposable type stuff. So film cameras are being made, but to the super low end. And I think what we're thinking of are cameras that are at least kind of in this kind of range, right? The Konica Big Mini, or even more so a camera like this that has, proper rangefinder, aperture control kind of camera like this. These cameras, like if this camera was produced today, it would have to be $1,000. A camera like this produced today would have to be $500, right? So, or people willing to pay that kind of money? I don't know. Now that is a good question though. And I have talked to a lot of my colleagues globally, not just in Hong Kong, but in Japan. I've talked to global leaders in the film industry, as well as those in the manufacturing industry. And we've had discussions like this, and we are all kind of on the same page of understanding the extent that it takes to make a camera. It's almost as complicated as making a car, right? In terms of the amount of moving parts and different suppliers and all that stuff you need. All that stuff needs to be in place. Like imagine if they stopped making motor vehicles, combustion engines, everything was electronic cars, right? For like 40, 50 years. And all of a sudden, someone's like, let's make a Jeep that's gas powered. It's like, okay, well, we need a company that makes pistons, and we need a company that can make crankshafts. Because, even Ford and Toyota, they don't make everything. They have subcontractors to make certain components. And back in the film days, Canon and Nikon and Minolta and Pentax and Ricoh, they also had subcontractors making small little things, right? That they didn't make. Well, when they start making cameras again, like for instance, even just the weirdest things, like who knows, right? Like even like the DX encoder, this thing here, that could have been made by some third-party manufacturer, and now Konica's like, we want to remake this camera, but first of all, who made these for us, the DX encode readers, and do they still exist? And if they don't, Konica will be like, well, we don't know how to make it. We haven't made those in 50 years, so we need to set up a team to figure out how to make this one thing again, right? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of engineering. And so I would love for something to happen, and something is happening. It's top secret. I can't talk about it, but film cameras are currently being designed by a team of people, but I can't tell you who and when it's going to be coming out. But someone is working on it. All right. Darko asking about the GFX 50R for street photography. None of those cameras, the medium format cameras, are that great for street photography. If you look at my Fujilove articles, I've used all of them, the GFX 100, GFX 50R, GFX 50S. Out of all of them, the 50S is actually the best camera for street photography. It's the most ergonomic. For the size and weight that you're carrying, you need a nice grip. I find the 50R is weirdly balanced for all-day street photography shooting. But the problem is, it takes a lot for the shutter to open and close for a camera body of that size. There's so much of a delay when you shoot that it's very slow shooting. So you need to be a well-crafted photographer, a well-trained photographer that's been shooting for even up to decades to be able to immediately adjust to it. And if you're not, it might take you a while to kind of get used to, like, you're anticipating a shot, and then you just pull the trigger, and then as you're pulling it, as the shutter's opening, the thing happens. Because the shutter recycle time on these medium format cameras are very slow. So in general, I would say I wouldn't recommend it for street photography unless you feel that you have the talent in terms of the craft of photography to be able to overcome the technical limitations of the GFX medium format line to be able to shoot on the street with it. But I've done it. Like I said, go to Fuji Love. I love it. You look at the resolution, like, oh man, like 50 megapixel, 100 megapixel for street. You look at that resolution, look at that dynamic range, and it's pretty sweet. But at the cost of timing, it's even slower than my film cameras in terms of the shutter recycle time. My GA645 medium format, because that is a leaf shutter medium format, the shutter is super fast as a 35 mil. So I would say, see, even the Hasselblad X1D, I think that's what it's called. It's a rangefinder style. It's leaf shutter, but that's also not very good for street photography. In fact, that looks like it would be better. It's actually worse. When Sony, let's see, sorry guys, this just jumped. Sorry, when there's a whole bunch of comments accumulating below, and then I touch the comment screen, my whole screen jumps. So I apologize. I'm constantly trying to figure out where I left off. When Sony bought Minolta's camera business, did any of those engineers move to Sony as well? Yes. They basically bought not only the intellectual property but the staff. So the original Sony, their A mount stuff, like the A700, the A900, those were all original Minolta designs that moved over, and a lot of the lenses were basically, they just took out the Minolta name and they just put Sony on it. They were originally Minolta design. In fact, the first gen of the A mount was all Minolta, and then the newer lenses sort of came out were actually originally Tamron, because at the time Sony didn't know how to make DSLR glass, right? And even then, most of their good glass was all Zeiss because Sony wasn't a lens manufacturer. They still aren't really. They are getting better. So a lot of the Minolta guys moved over to Sony, but they were, and also, but some of them quit and they went to Fujifilm, right? So definitely that did happen. Hey, Paul Yan, how's it going, buddy? You're greetings from Beijing. Nice to see you, Paul. I met Paul in Bangkok for a film photography conference, and we had a good time. Paul Yan is a Chinese slash Taiwan. I know you're stationed in Taiwan, right, Paul? But you're originally from China. But he's very well known in Taiwan. He's a rock musician, rock music producer, and a photographer. And so he's a fun guy. So, hey, Paul, nice to see you. Well, virtually see you. And I miss you. Cafe YVR, Paul Yan's video with Taka. Yeah, and I did a YouTube video with Paul. Would you think of buying the Leica Monochrome 2460 today? Is good. I'm using Fuji X-Pro3 for black and white photography. Thanks. It's kind of a loaded question. It's more about going from Fuji to Leica, period, not necessarily the 246. It's quite a leap in terms of price, as well as ecosystem, as well as just a learning curve of shooting with Leica versus Fujifilm, and even switching from Sony-based sensors to Tower Jazz slash Panasonic type sensors. When even in your post-processing process, you're going to notice like, oh, wow, this sensor behaves differently than my last sensor. So even the Fujifilm uses their X-Trans technology, it's still a Sony sensor that's made to Fujifilm's. The color filter array is different. But on the GFX line, they don't use X-Trans, right? They actually use the Bayer sensor color filter array. And so we are used to, us Fujifilm shooters are used to that Sony sensor processing with Fujifilm processing color science kind of layered on top of it. When you go Leica, it's very different. I noticed it right away. It actually has more of a Canon feel in terms of the post-processing and the color profiles and stuff. It feels more Canon to me, but that's a big move. It's a very loaded question. We could talk about an hour on that, but I would say really do your research. It's a very different way of shooting. I shoot film, so I'm used to it. I'm used to going to a Leica rangefinder and not having an EVF and, shooting through the OVF and then not being able to actually get color photos with just black and white. Like I'm used to it, but there's a bit of a learning curve with that. So I would say think carefully before you make that decision. Kusanagi Kyo, how's it going? Kyo, digital versus film cost, efficiency. Digital is cheaper in the long run than film. What do you think? Yeah, actually, I had a conversation with someone recently about medium format. If you are a casual medium format shooter, you're better off to buy a medium format film camera and pay the extra price on film and learn to develop it yourself at home, because your upfront cost of buying a brand new digital medium format, because if you're going to buy one, might as well don't buy one that's like 15 years old or 10 years old. Get like a modern one. Get a nice Fujifilm GFX 50R or 50S. If you can afford the X1D, go for it. And then memory cards, you got to upgrade your hard drives. You got to upgrade a lot of stuff because these files are huge. Your upfront cost, where you can get a decent film medium for my camera for like under $300-400 if you get a rangefinder top, like a GS645 from Fujifilm, or even some of those older Voigtlander pancake ones that kind of fold open with the bellows. You can pick those up for probably even under $200. And film is expensive, yes, but if you shoot casually, it's cheaper for maybe 2 or 3 years. And by that time, if you realize I love medium, but now film is getting kind of expensive and I'm tired of the workflow of getting this stuff developed, I'm going to move up the digital. You've kind of primed yourself for a medium format style of shooting, and that's fine. But I know a lot of people who got into medium format thinking it'll be just like 35 or APS-C digital and it has a different feel to it, or those that went from film medium format, took the leap into digital, didn't like it, sold off the stuff. Actually, I know a guy right now. If you guys are interested in the Hasselblad 907X 50th anniversary edition, I have a friend who currently is selling it because he shoots Hasselblad film, bought the 907 thinking, oh, wow, this will replace film, and he doesn't like it. And now he's going back to film, and he realized it was a big mistake. So when it comes to medium format, 100%, I say start off with film first if you want to get into medium format, because even digital medium format is quite cropped still, right? It's not yet 6:6. It's getting closer, but it's still not as bad as what APS-C is to 35 mil, which the current digital medium format is to film medium format, but there's still a bit of a crop there. So you're not getting the full, especially if you're going 6.7, 6.9, and if you're going 617 with the GX617. And of course, when it comes to large format, there is no replacement. Large format is large format film, and digital, they don't make digital sensors this big yet. 4x5, 8x10, 16x20, 20x24. There's film that big, and you can do some amazing stuff with in an analog film type sort of photography by using silver gelatin, plate type photography, and that stuff. Obviously, there is no digital equivalent. So, Derek Tucker, are there any good camera brands coming out of China? China is still at that stage where if it's an old traditional type technology, like cars, cameras, stuff like that, they're good at manufacturing those things en masse at high quality. So Fujifilm, Canon, Nikon, they all have manufacturing plants in China, right? But to birth the idea of these things, they're still kind of not that great at it, other than new technology, right? So stuff like drones. So DJI was founded by someone who was from China, who studied in Hong Kong, who then, so I think DJI is a Hong Kong registered company, but the fellow is from China, and drones are relatively new. So it's new technology. So no other country has a head start over any other country yet, right? Where like film cameras and then eventually digital cameras, they got 60, 70, 80 years head start over Chinese manufacturing. And same with cars. There is no, other than maybe niche trucks and tractors and buses, in terms of passenger vehicles, China is like 100 years behind American manufacturers and 80 to 70 years behind Japanese manufacturers and 50 years behind Korean manufacturers. It takes a long time to catch up in terms of not just technology, but how do you build a car and assemble it and have a design team and think 5 years ahead. All that takes time. So you're not seeing original cars coming out of China, right? It's just, it takes a lot to do that. But anything that's new, like electric scooters or drones or anything that's new like that, China's a great place. So stuff like sports cams, those little GoPro, that kind of stuff, gimbals, digital gimbals, drones, all that kind of stuff coming out of China, good stuff. As good of stuff coming out of North America. Like it's a pretty level playing field. But we're talking about interchangeable lens cameras, that kind of stuff. I think even China realizes, look, these are highly ingrained brands, highly ingrained ecosystems. Samsung tried their hand on interchangeable lens cameras. Even they, with their technology and their knowledge and know-how and supply chain, distribution, supply chain, all that stuff, Samsung pulled out, right? They're like, we can't do it. We're going to keep on making smartphone sensors. We'll make components for camera manufacturers, but we're out of the camera making business when it comes to interchangeable lens cameras. They couldn't make money there. And so if Samsung can't do it, I don't see any Chinese camera manufacturer doing it. And I don't see them wanting to do it because sales are plunging when it comes to traditional digital cameras. And so why would you want to enter this market anyway? So if I was a Chinese manufacturer, I wouldn't be trying to make the next Sony A7. Like, why? Every year sales drops in those things. They want to see where sales are going up. And where sales are going up, smartphones, drones, action cams, gimbals, those type of accessories. And that's where you're seeing companies like Aperture and Godex for lighting and all the little accessories like monitors and that kind of stuff. They're all coming out of China because it's like, well, everyone's buying it. There's good margins. We know how to make these things. And there's a level playing field. So that's my thoughts on Chinese manufacturers making cameras. Picked up a Mamiya 645E. Awesome, with an 81.8. That's nice. You can imagine the bokeh out of that thing. And use this occasionally with a V550 scanner, all under 550 bucks. Exactly. And that's why I'm saying, if you want to get into medium format, it's still cheaper, I think, when it comes to digital versus film. Go film medium format first. It's slow. It's a much slower process in terms of like, it's a bit fidgety, like self-scanning and that kind of stuff. But, and also, Darko, if you decide to go this way, try. So the any of those flatbed scanners, I had one for a while. They're okay because it's trying to scan this entire flatbed. If you get, a digital camera and take a photo of that negative using something flat like the pixelator, you will see a huge difference in your image quality. Just give it a try. I know it's convenient to put all your negs through a neg holder, lay it flat, hit scan, and then walk away and come back 45 minutes later. But so if you have that one neg that you think, wow, this is beautiful, rescan it. And that's what I did. And it's a huge difference when you scan it with another camera. GA645, a good medium format camera for people new to medium format? Yes, because it's basically a point and shoot medium format. It auto loads, auto advances, auto focus, auto exposure. You can manually override these things as well. You can manually focus if you want, but it's scale focus. You can manually set the exposure, but it's a good built-in flash. It also has exposure and date timestamp encoding. So after you shoot, you can see what your settings were. So it's a good starter, but they are between $500 to $1,000, depending on which model. If you want to save even more money, you get the older manual version of that, which is the GS series. So GS645, and there's a wide version, and as well as there's different options. But those things you could probably pick up for under $500. All right. Sorry for these little quiet moments. I'm just trying to pick up here. I'm seeing you guys are having a great conversation, which is great. I appreciate that. Seven Artisans and TT Artisans are amazing companies. Yeah, because you know what they're doing. And actually, I really like Per Gear. I like their glass. What they're doing is they are taking vintage lens design from the 50s and 60s and 70s and just copying them. 5 element, 6 element, seven element designs that are out of patent, especially, and they're just copying them. And manufacturing quality is now so high in China because the Japanese and most of the Japanese have been sending their stuff to be built there. So Chinese engineers are like, oh, this is how you multi-coat. Oh, this is how you bake this glass and polish them. This is how you're teaching this generation of these Chinese manufacturing engineers how to make lenses. They break off, they quit, they start their own companies, they go to universities all over the world. They go back to China and they're like, all right, we have a highly educated, highly motivated workforce that's a third to a tenth of the cost of labor versus Japan and Germany and some of these more advanced manufacturing countries. And they can pump this stuff out, and the lens optical design is sound because they're taking an old Zeiss or Voigtlander or an old Nikon or Canon lens design, an old Schneider, Rodenstock, whatever they're taking, and it's a tried and tested lens design, but using modern technology, they're going to be sharp. And that's why I'm telling people, like, these lenses coming out of Seven Artisans, TT Artisans, Per Gear, not all of them, but the ones I've tested from Per Gear, the 25-1.6, the 35-135-1.6 as well, but even Viltrox, which is autofocus, they're 33-1.4. Like, these are like super sharp, cool, characteristic lenses. They're not inventing the lens design. They're copying something that already existed, which is fine with me. They're kind of rehashing these vintage designs and putting them into modern digital cameras, and they're fantastic. I think they're great. Dust removal at flatbeds are the reason why I want to switch to DSLR scans. Yeah, that's another thing. You're trying to dust control like an entire flatbed. Just definitely, if you haven't tried scanning per neg using a digital camera, give it a try. Do them with the keepers. Don't do like an entire roll, but it's fast when um you have a nice holder like the pixelator, like something like this. Show it off again here. Right here, pixelator. This is it right here. Holds the negs. This is a 35 opening. You remove two of these and you get the 120 opening, and then you remove all of these and you get the 4x5 opening for scanning. Kyo recommended place for developing Vancouver. Go to the lab, just called the Lab Vancouver. Give them a try. Say hi to Chu or Hugh or Tack. I've known them. I've known Chu for over 40 years, but I've known Tack and Hugh for over 25 years. The best. They do dip and dunk. London Drugs is fine as well, but they use machine processing, and depends on which lab you go to, how well they keep the chemistry clean. Sometimes you can get scratches from the rollers, but because the lab uses all dip and dunk process, you won't get scratches on your negs. Um, Take, you think you could still get a Nikon Cool Scan to work? Yeah, I know a lot of people that use the old, either the Nikon Cool Scans or the Minolta scanners. Those two were probably the best back in the day in the 2000s. Everyone wanted them. Uh, they're still around. Like, I know a lot of my camera nerd friends globally that still has theirs working. And if you can get a hold of one of those, that's fine as well. Ali Shadpur. I've recognized your name. You've come here before. Thanks for joining. APS-C future, do you see any advancement in sensor technology to pass the limitation of today's APS-C sensors? Definitely. But whatever APS-C technology that they discover will also be applied to 35 mil. So whatever that advancement is, it will find its way up to full frame, right? So right now with APS-C, there's probably only You guys can correct me, those that are like super nerdy that know more than me, but Canon still uses crop sensors, APS-C. I think if they're APS-C cameras like the M50 and the M6 and the M5, if they say dual pixel focus technology, and that's still a Canon sensor. So Canon is still making them. Leica in their CL, they have an APS-C sensor, and that will be made by Tower Jazz. So that's Canon, Tower Jazz, and then Sony makes them for everybody else. Samsung made them for their own cameras. I don't know if they're still making them. And if they are, they're not making for themselves. Maybe they're selling them to Nikon for their cropped. But I have a feeling Nikon is buying them from Sony as well. So Sony, Canon, and Tower Jazz, three major manufacturers, maybe Samsung, right? And so the technology that's in the APS-C is finding its way to 35 mil, but there are some inherent advantages to APS-C. For instance, smaller the sensor, the smaller the area, the quicker you can do things like a global shutter, right? Or any technology when it has to do with reading things quickly. And so that's why when the first digital cameras that can do 4K 60, 422 10-bit, it was like I think it was the Panasonic GH series, right? I think maybe it was a GH5 or GH4. And people were like, why is the Micro Four Thirds digital camera outperforming a full frame digital camera? It just has to do with the processing power. The Micro Four Thirds sensor is half the size of a full frame. And because of that smallness, it can take advantage of everything from heat dissipation. And that's why a lot of full frame digital cameras before, when they did video, there's always a major crop. Why did they crop? They didn't want to read off the entire sensor because it took up so much energy and so much power that instead of using the full 35 millimeter sensor, obviously you have to crop it to 60x9, but they cropped it even further because they're like, we can't, there's no throughput. The bottleneck was a throughput. They couldn't process that much information that quickly. So there is an inherent advantage to smaller sensors. So that's why something like a Fujifilm X-T4 does hybrid stuff really well. And even in the professional video world, they call it Super 35, which is APS-C. So even in the professional digital movie making field, I think that even the Blackmagic 4K and 8K cameras, are they not Micro Four Thirds and APS-C? Those cameras are also cropped, right? They're not 35 mil. So I still think that camera manufacturers and sensor developers will continue to support APS-C at least. Micro Four Thirds currently only exists as a significant platform for video at this point. For stills, I think people have kind of jumped ship. They can't seem to get past that 20 megapixel barrier, where APS-C, I think with the new XH2 that's coming sometime next year, will probably have at least a 36, if not a 40 megapixel with same noise control as the 26 megapixel right now. And so, yes, I think at least for another 2-3 years, APS-C definitely will still get major updates and will keep up with whatever 35 mil is doing. And if you notice, the new the Leica SL2 and even some of the R series Canon and the new Sony A7S Mark III, are they 40, 50, 60 megapixels? They've gone backwards, right? They've gone down to 24. They've made less pixels, realizing, oh wow, like pixel density makes a big difference. And so an APS-C 24 megapixel versus a full frame 24 megapixel, even if they're both 24 megapixels, the density is higher on APS-C, which means you'll get more noise, right? So even this whole megapixel war, this fight to go for more megapixels, I think that kind of has settled down a little bit right now. There's no point in cramming more pixels unless you make the sensor larger, which is why the Fujifilm GFX 50 series, even though it's 50 megapixels, will still have better noise, will still have better dynamic range, will still have better performance than a 35 millimeter equivalent at the same megapixel count. And that's why the GFX 100 is great. Much larger sensor and less pixel density than if a full frame sensor had 100 megapixels. And now they're doing that whole pixel shift thing as well as a trick. And guys, it's been an hour. I'm almost caught up here. But I think I am done. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna listen to Paul Yan, my buddy here. Taki, you're intriguing me into loading some 20-year-old expired film. in the closet into my Nikon FM1 and Konica Auto S1 and hit the streets. Paul, do it. Go for it. And the Nikon FM is awesome. It's a great camera. And I would love to see it. Do it. Do it. And John, you think there might be this leaked news of the Fujifilm Mini 100 megapixel medium format? There might be this leaked news. Is there some news of some new Mini 100 megapixel medium format? I don't know. It would make sense because they embedded the battery into the grip, right? They made it into one body, sort of like what the Nikon and Canon does with their top end DSLRs. It was too heavy. The GFX 100, I didn't like it. Like I liked the images coming out of it, but I basically said to Fujifilm, I know you can do it. Make a GFX 100S, like put it in the 50S body, and those that want the grip can still add the grip and get the extra battery power. But please, it's too big. It's a studio camera. And John, you travel a lot, right? And your wife, I'm sure she doesn't want to carry around that camera. It's just way too huge, way too big. And so hopefully, if it's true, I'd be happy. So thank you so much for joining, guys. It's been an hour and 6 minutes, and there's 85 of you still on. And I appreciate you coming to join. Thank you for all your questions. Again, if I missed your question, I apologize. I will check them. Like, if you really want to answer for one of your questions, please put it in the regular comment section once I post the video, and I will get to it as soon as possible. So we'll see you again next week. I don't know when I'm going to do it. Maybe I'll move again to the morning for those of you in Europe and those of you in North America, but we'll see. But until then, happy shooting. Peace.